So, it's finally over, huh? Bleach TYBW Part 2 has come to an end, and now we start the excruciating wait for Part 3, which unfortunately doesn't even have a release date yet. But before finally saying goodbye to Bleach for a long time, this is my thoughts on Part 2 in its entirety. The good, the bad, the amazing, the disappointing, and most importantly, how this part saved the entire 1000-year Blood War arc, along with addressing some of the controversies that surround this part, such as the animation downgrade and people calling it worse than Part 1. Is it really that bad, or is it actually better than Part 1? And how well does it stand on its own while not being compared to Part 1? Stay tuned till the end of this video to find out. But before diving into the juicy stuff, I first want to talk about some of my favorite episodes and moments from this part and my thoughts on them. This part of the TYBW arc is the get back from the Soul Reapers after their massive loss during the first invasion, which left the Soul Society completely destroyed with thousands of casualties and the death of the head captain Yamamoto. And there's no other fight that shows just how much the Soul Reapers have prepared after the massive L that they took during the first invasion better than the fight between Rukia and As Nodt. As Nodt was this terrifying presence during Part 1. He managed to take down Byakuya extremely easily and even stole his Bankai, and if not for Kubo literally getting death threats, Byakuya might have died right then and there. And his opponent this time is Rukia, Byakuya's sister, and a massive part of this fight is Rukia having to deal with her fears about her brother and how he feels about her, which you honestly can't even blame her for because of how Byakuya treated her before and during the Soul Society arc. And with the help of Byakuya and him finally acknowledging Rukia, makes it possible for her to use her Bankai and defeat As Nodt, Stern Ritter F, the Fear. And finally getting the conclusion to Byakuya and Rukia's broken relationship that's been set up ever since the Soul Society arc, and seeing Rukia's beautiful Bankai, which also happens to be my favorite Bankai in the entire series, and getting characterization to As Nodt and seeing what he symbolizes along with his beautifully ironic end makes this easily my favorite episode of this entire part. The animation was solid, the art was great, the voice acting was breathtaking, and the writing was perfect. Moving on to the very next episode, we get the return of Kenpachi Zaraki, who is the pure definition of a badass, and this episode manages to make him even more badass than he already was, which I did not even think was possible. We get the introduction to Gremmy, who is quite possibly the most broken Bleach character, with his ability to literally make anything he imagines into reality. And his opponent is Kenpachi, one of the most raw anime characters of all time, and not someone people would have expected to be the one fighting against Gremmy. But it just works. Their matchup makes for one of the most insane anime fights of all time with the insanity of their powers. A perfect example is when Gremmy decides to quite literally drop a fucking meteor on the Soul Society, and Kenpachi, being the badass he is, he slices the fucking meteor in half using his Shikai. And yet again, the fight had a beautifully ironic end, with Gremmy's imagination of Kenpachi being what ended up killing him. Everything that I said about the previous episode in terms of production also applies here, and was definitely one of the best episodes this part. One of my highlights in this entire part was seeing the BAMBI squad, consisting of Bambietta, Candace, Liloto, Meninus, and Giselle. Seeing them in the anime just made me like their presence way more than it did in the manga. Especially hearing their voices, it just makes such a huge difference. And I'll never forgive Giselle for what they did to Bambietta. I'm still fuming over that, to be honest. And fortunately, Kubo heard my prayers and made Mayuri pay Giselle back and absolutely humiliated them. Mayuri was also such a great character in this part, and Kubo managed to show what makes him such an interesting character in a shonen anime where he's technically on the side of the good. And the BAMBI squad's fight with Ichigo was great as well, especially the moment with Ichigo where he literally warns Candace to dodge his Getsuga Jujisho. And to end this section off, I wanna talk about the Squad Zero stuff, which was pretty much the final 3 episodes of this part. The entire Squad Zero fight with Yuha's Royal Guards was amazing, and the best part is the fact that pretty much 90% of the fight was not in the manga. Yes, you heard that correctly, these final 3 episodes were pretty much completely different from the manga, and that's a really good thing because man, the entire fight in the manga was honestly garbage. Seeing Senjumaru being animated and hearing her voice was great because she was one of my favorite Squad Zero members in terms of design, and I always thought that the manga did her dirty, but thankfully the anime fixed it and made her one of the most important characters of the series because of the final episode. The other fights such as Tenjiro vs Yhwach and Oetsu's fights were also great, and the Ichibei and Yuha fight was good for the most part, but I was definitely kind of disappointed with how they ended it. Before we move on, if you've watched the video this far, then I would really appreciate it if you guys could leave a like on this video if you're enjoying it. It would really mean a lot to me and motivate me to make more high quality videos like this. Moving on to a spicy question. Is this part worse than the first part? And if I'm being brutally honest, yes, this part is worse than part 1, both in terms of production and arguably in terms of the content as well. The animation this season is very much a noticeable downgrade compared to season 1. The best animated scenes this entire part were Menina's fighting against Ichigo, Kenny slicing a meteor, and Tenjiro fighting against Yhwach, and some other minor scenes compared to part 1 where it was one of the best animated anime of 2022. And even the content that part 1 adapted was overall better than this part, at least in my opinion, with absolutely insane episodes such as the Yamamoto and Yuha fight, Ichigo arriving at Soul Society, all the Unohana and Kenpachi stuff, along with Ichigo's True Shikai, and even the other episodes had lots of amazing moments and above average animation for the most part. But the thing is, this part doesn't have to be better than part 1. Let me explain. Even though this part definitely had some really good moments, they pretty much sacrificed the quality of this part to make part 3 and pretty much the entirety of this arc better. And that's through the use of added content. This is the part where we finally started to see the added content and changes that we were promised by Tite Kubo, and honestly, these changes and added content pretty much saved the entire arc, fixed plot holes, and completely reworked some really disappointing stuff from the manga. That just make the arc so much better. I can't mention every little thing they changed or added, but there might be videos about those on YouTube from other content creators that you could check out. But I do want to talk about some of the changes that really stuck out to me. First of all, there were lots of small changes and additional moments that weren't there in the manga. And now moving on to something major, this part added Shinji's Bankai, and this was something that wasn't even in the manga. The only time we got to see his Bankai was in the Bleach novels. The Yuha and Ichibei flashback we got before their fight was one of the best changes. I don't want to say why because it would be spoilers, but it basically fixed a very massive plot hole in the manga that happens later on. Next up, we have the entire Squad Zero fight being reworked. Like, this part was pretty much unrecognizable from the manga, and it's 1,000 times better than what happened in the manga. Next up, we have possibly the biggest added content, and that is Senjumaru Shutara's Bankai. And this Bankai was something completely new for every single Bleach fans because it wasn't even in the novels like Shinji's Bankai, and it is easily one of the best Bankai in the series. Overall, even though this part was definitely a noticeable downgrade compared to part 1, it definitely made up for it in other areas such as the changes that just make the series better overall. It was nice to see characters such as the BAMBI squad, Mayuri and Kenny shine, although it is sad that Ichigo was pretty much non-existent this entire part, and I was definitely disappointed with where they ended this part, but part 3 is about to be genuinely insane from the get-go and possibly the best part so far, if the animation is good and they manage to deliver on their promise of even more added content. If you've watched the video this far without skipping, then I just want you to know that I really appreciate it a lot and it really means a lot to me, and thank you guys for finishing the video. And if you enjoyed watching the video at all, it would really make my day if you could hit the subscribe button, or you can just show your support by pressing the like button on the video and sharing it with your friends. You can also check out some of my other Bleach videos. With all that being said though, have a nice day and hopefully see you guys in my next video.